This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.
The time traveler, a brilliant and eccentric scientist, was hosting a dinner party at his home in Richmond, Surrey. His guests were an eclectic mix of individuals, each bringing their own unique perspective to the evening's events. The dining room hummed with anticipation, bathed in the warm, flickering glow of candlelight. Shadows danced on the walls, mirroring the excited movements of the guests. The air was thick with the rich aroma of roasted meats and the fruity notes of fine wine, creating an intoxicating atmosphere that heightened the senses. Among the guests sat the narrator, his eyes bright with curiosity, eagerly soaking in every detail. He felt a tingling sensation in his fingertips, as if he were on the brink of touching something extraordinary. Beside him, a skeptical psychologist furrowed his brow, his mind working overtime to rationalize the fantastical claims of their host. The practical medical man listened with polite interest, his hands folded neatly on the table, a picture of composure amidst the growing excitement. The very young man could barely contain himself, practically vibrating with enthusiasm, his youth allowing him to embrace the impossible more readily than his older companions. The provincial mayor maintained a dignified air, though his eyes betrayed a hint of wonder, as if the foundations of his orderly world were beginning to crack. As the last morsels of dessert were savored, a hush fell over the room. The time traveler rose from his seat, a mischievous glint in his eye that sent a shiver of anticipation through the gathered company. "Gentlemen," he announced, his voice cutting through the silence like a knife, "if you'd be so kind as to follow me, I have something extraordinary to show you." Hearts quickening, the guests followed their host through the winding corridors of the grand house. The narrator's palms grew damp with each step, his mind racing with possibilities. What could possibly warrant such secrecy and buildup? They entered the laboratory, and it was as if they had stepped into another world. The room was alive with the symphony of invention, whirring gears, bubbling liquids, and the sharp crackle of electricity. Strange contraptions lined the walls, their purposes as mysterious as they were intriguing. In the center of the room stood a peculiar device, draped in a velvet cloth that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly quality. With a flourish that would make a magician envious, the time traveler yanked away the cloth, revealing his masterpiece. "Behold," he declared, his voice trembling with barely contained excitement, "a machine capable of traversing the fourth dimension." The room erupted in a cacophony of gasps and exclamations. The psychologist's face contorted in a battle between skepticism and scientific curiosity. The medical man's eyes widened, his practical nature struggling to comprehend the implications of such a device. The young man's mouth hung open in awe, drinking in every detail of the fantastic machine. Even the mayor, usually so composed, found himself slack-jawed in amazement. Sensing their disbelief, the time traveler produced a smaller model of his invention. "Perhaps a demonstration is in order," he said, a sly smile playing on his lips. He turned to the psychologist, extending the miniature device. "My dear fellow, would you do the honors?" With trembling hands, the psychologist pressed the lever. In an instant, the model vanished, leaving behind nothing but a faint shimmer in the air, like heat rising from sun-baked pavement. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the young man's whispered, "Impossible!" Chaos erupted as the gravity of what they had witnessed sank in. Exclamations of disbelief mingled with wild theories and rapid-fire questions. The time traveler stood in the eye of the storm, reveling in the impact of his revelation. As the initial shock subsided, a heated debate ensued. The psychologist, clinging to rationality like a lifeline, argued for logical explanations. Mirrors, sleight of hand, anything but the impossible truth before them. The young man, eyes blazing with passion, defended the possibility of time travel, his words tumbling out in an excited rush. The medical man sought to ground the discussion in known scientific principles, his voice a calm counterpoint to the rising tension. The mayor remained uncharacteristically silent, his worldview thoroughly shaken. Throughout it all, the narrator observed, his mind racing with the implications of what he had seen. The very fabric of reality seemed to have been torn asunder, revealing glimpses of a universe far more vast and mysterious than any of them had imagined. He felt as if he were standing on the edge of a great precipice, with the unknown stretching out before him like an endless sea. As the evening drew to a close, the time traveler made one final announcement that sent a fresh wave of excitement through the room. "Gentlemen, I invite you to return next week," he said, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. "For I intend to embark on a journey through time itself, and I promise you a full account of my adventures upon my return." With minds buzzing and hearts racing, the guests bid their farewells and stepped out into the cool night air. As they made their way home, they continued to debate and discuss, their voices carrying on the breeze. Most remained skeptical, clinging to the familiar shores of established science. Yet a seed of wonder had been planted in each of their hearts, nurtured by the memory of a small machine vanishing into thin air, leaving behind only questions in the tantalizing promise of the impossible. As the narrator lay in bed that night, sleep eluding him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the cusp of something monumental. Little did he know that at that very moment, in the quiet of his laboratory, the time traveler was making final preparations for his journey. The full-size time machine hummed with potential energy, its gleaming surfaces reflecting the determination in the inventor's eyes. With trembling fingers, he reached for the controls, his heart pounding with a potent mix of exhilaration and trepidation. The journey of a lifetime was about to begin. The time traveler's heart pounded with a potent mix of exhilaration and trepidation. He settled into his full-size time machine, his fingers hovering over the controls with a slight tremble. The air in the laboratory felt thick with anticipation, each breath a struggle against the weight of the moment. He closed his eyes, savoring the last seconds of familiarity, the gentle hum of his equipment, the faint scent of oil and metal, the cool touch of the lever beneath his palm. All of it etched into his memory. With a deep breath that seemed to fill his entire being, he opened his eyes and activated the device. The world exploded into motion. Colors blurred and stretched, sounds warped and twisted. It felt as if his very atoms were being pulled apart and reassembled. The solid walls of his laboratory melted away, replaced by a whirlwind of light and shadow. Days flashed by like frames in a film reel spinning out of control. Sunlight and darkness alternated in a frenzied dance, merging into a perpetual twilight. The time traveler gripped his seat, knuckles white, as vertigo threatened to overwhelm him. Outside his window, the landscape transformed at a dizzying pace. Buildings shot up from the earth like time-lapse flowers, only to crumble and be replaced in the blink of an eye. Entire civilizations rose and fell, their histories compressed into fleeting moments. The sky above became a kaleidoscope, familiar blue giving way to otherworldly hues as the atmosphere itself evolved. Vegetation morphed before his eyes, familiar forms twisting into alien shapes. Forests expanded and receded like breathing lungs, their colors shifting in ways that defied imagination. Mountains eroded to dust while new peaks thrust upward, coastlines danced, and oceans advanced and retreated in geological heartbeats. The sun's path became erratic, its arc across the sky no longer a constant. With a jolt of realization, the time traveler understood that the Earth's very rotation was changing, altering the fundamental rhythm of day and night. As eons flew by, a creeping sense of isolation gripped him. Each second carried him further from everything he had ever known, every person he had ever loved. The enormity of time threatened to crush him, his mind reeling as it struggled to comprehend the scale of his journey. With hands that shook from more than just the machine's vibration, he manipulated the controls. The wild rush of time began to decelerate, the blur of changes gradually becoming more distinct. His heart thundered in his chest as he watched the years tick by more slowly, searching for the right moment to halt his incredible voyage. Finally, with a bone-jarring jolt that rattled his teeth, the time machine ground to a stop. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by his ragged breathing. The display before him read 802, 701 AD. For a long moment, he sat motionless, his mind struggling to process what he had just experienced. He had witnessed the lifespan of Earth itself, seen empires rise and crumble like sandcastles against the tide of time. The weight of history pressed down on him, threatening to overwhelm his senses. On unsteady legs, he rose and stepped out of the machine. The world that greeted him was a paradox of familiarity and utter strangeness. Lush vegetation surrounded him, but the plants were like nothing he had ever seen, their forms both beautiful and unsettling. In the distance, sleek structures rose against the sky, hinting at an advanced civilization beyond his wildest imaginings. The air felt different in his lungs, carrying scents he couldn't identify. Sweet, alien, intoxicating. A soft breeze caressed his face, whispering secrets of this new world. The time traveler stood there, disoriented and exhilarated, on the threshold of an adventure beyond his wildest dreams. As he took his first tentative steps into this brave new world, movement caught his eye. A figure emerged from behind a cluster of strange, iridescent plants. It was small, almost childlike, with delicate features that seemed both human and not. The time traveler's breath caught in his throat as he realized he was about to make first contact with the inhabitants of this distant future. What kind of beings had humanity evolved into over the countless millennia? And more importantly, how would they receive this visitor from the distant past? The time traveler's journey into the distant future led him to an unexpected encounter. His first interaction was with the Elois, a diminutive and childlike race that now inhabited the earth. As he stepped out of his time machine, a wave of dizziness washed over him. The air shimmered like a mirage, thick with an otherworldly quality that made his skin tingle. He blinked rapidly, trying to adjust his vision to the kaleidoscope of colors before him. The landscape was a living canvas, splashed with hues so vibrant they seemed to pulse with their own energy. Dotting this surreal panorama were buildings unlike anything he had ever seen. Massive structures that seemed to defy gravity, their ornate facades blending seamlessly with the lush parkland surrounding them. It was as if nature and architecture had become one, each complementing the other in perfect harmony. The scene was breathtakingly beautiful, yet something about it felt off, like a dream too perfect to be real. His heart raced with scientific curiosity as he observed the Elois for the first time. They were small creatures, barely reaching his chest, with delicate features that seemed almost too perfect to be human. Their curly hair caught the sunlight, shimmering like spun gold in the breeze. Large, expressive eyes gazed at him with a mixture of innocence and mild interest, sparkling with an otherworldly light. As they moved about, their tiny mouths with bright red lips curved into constant smiles, as if they hadn't a care in the world. The time traveler felt a strange mix of fascination and unease. These beings were clearly human, yet so far removed from what he knew that they might as well have been aliens. Attempting to communicate with the Elois proved to be a frustrating challenge. Their language was simplistic, more akin to the cooing of doves than the complex discourse he was accustomed to. He found himself gesturing wildly, pointing at objects and miming actions, feeling more like a street performer than a respected scientist. The Elois watched him with mild amusement, their lack of curiosity about his sudden appearance or strange attire both puzzling and irritating. As days passed, the time traveler explored this new world, his mind a whirlwind of questions and theories. The Elois seemed to live in a utopian society, their days filled with leisurely pursuits that bordered on the absurd. They frolicked in the sunlight like carefree children, their laughter echoing across the verdant landscape in a never-ending chorus of joy. Their diet consisted of exotic fruits, which they consumed with gusto during communal feasts that seemed more like playful picnics than formal meals. The time traveler found himself drawn into these gatherings, marveling at the strange, sweet flavors that burst on his tongue. Yet even as he participated in their simple pleasures, a nagging sense of unease grew within him. Where were the signs of work, of progress, of intellectual pursuit? The grand buildings stood as testament to a once great civilization, but the Elois showed no interest in maintaining them, let alone creating anything new. It was as if humanity had reached its peak and then stopped. The thought sent a chill down his spine, despite the warmth of the eternal summer that seemed to blanket this world. The time traveler's mind whirred with possibilities. Perhaps this was the result of mankind's long-term conquest over nature, he mused. With no need for labor, strife, or intellectual advancement, had humanity simply evolved into these childlike creatures, content to bask in the fruits of their ancestors' labors? The idea was both fascinating and terrifying. But as the sun began to set each day, a change came over the Elois that shattered the illusion of their perfect world. Their carefree demeanor gave way to a palpable tension, like prey sensing a predator's approach. They huddled together in their communal buildings, their eyes wide with a fear they couldn't articulate. The time traveler found himself drawn into their nightly ritual, his own heart racing with an inexplicable dread as darkness fell. The absence of the elderly or infirm nagged at him, a glaring omission in this otherwise perfect world. And that strange underlying fear that gripped the Eloi as night approached. What could be lurking in the shadows of this utopia? The question haunted him, turning his dreams into nightmares filled with shapeless terrors. As he lay awake one night, listening to the soft breathing of the sleeping Eloi around him, the time traveler couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong with this seeming paradise. The moonlight filtering through the windows cast eerie shadows on the walls, and every rustle of leaves outside made his pulse quicken. Suddenly, a sound unlike anything he had heard before cut through the night. It was a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from the very depths of the earth. The Eloi around him stirred, whimpering in their sleep. The time traveler sat up, his heart pounding in his chest. As he peered into the darkness beyond the window, he caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows, something that was decidedly not Eloi. The time traveler's breath caught in his throat. The reality of his situation crashed over him like a tidal wave, leaving him gasping for air. The time traveler's breath caught in his throat. The reality of his situation crashed over him like a tidal wave, leaving him gasping for air. Panic, cold and merciless, gripped his chest with icy fingers. He was stranded, marooned in this alien future with no way back to his own time. His mind reeling, he began to search, at first methodically, then with increasing desperation. Every blade of grass on the hillside felt the touch of his trembling fingers. The surrounding meadow, once a picturesque scene of tranquility, now seemed to mock him with its serenity. The gentle breeze that rustled through the unfamiliar flora carried whispers of his deepening predicament, each gust a taunting reminder of his helplessness. The sun beat down on his back, its warmth a stark contrast to the chill of fear that had settled in his bones. Sweat beaded on his forehead, trickling down his face and neck. The air was thick with the sweet scent of unknown flowers, but to the time traveler it felt suffocating. In his frantic state, he turned to the Eloi, their childlike faces a stark contrast to the turmoil in his own. He questioned them, his voice rising with each uncomprehending stare he received. Their limited intelligence, once a subject of fascination, now fueled his frustration. Their lack of concern was maddening, like trying to explain the concept of drowning to fish. "Where is it?" he shouted, his words echoing across the peaceful landscape. "My machine! Where has it gone?" The Eloi merely blinked at him, their vacant smiles never wavering. One of them reached out to touch his arm, as if to comfort him, but the gesture only intensified his sense of isolation. As the initial shock began to ebb, a new theory took root in his mind. The machine hadn't simply vanished or been moved by natural forces. No, someone or something had taken it. The thought sent a chill down his spine, transforming the idyllic future he had imagined into something far more sinister. Days blurred together as the time traveler expanded his search. He combed through nearby areas with the thoroughness of a man whose life depended on it, because it did. The lush landscapes that had once filled him with wonder now seemed to hide secrets in every shadow. Each rustling leaf, each shifting shadow made him jump, his nerves frayed to breaking point. His initial fascination with this world of tomorrow faded, replaced by a gnawing desperation that aided him day and night. Sleep became a luxury he could ill afford, and when it did come, it was filled with nightmares of being forever lost in time. He would wake with a start, his heart pounding, the echo of his own screams ringing in his ears. The disappearance of the time machine had ripped away the veil of superficial observation. Details he had previously overlooked now screamed for his attention. The strange wells that dotted the landscape like pockmarks on the earth's skin took on a more ominous air. Their purpose remained unclear, but they seemed to pulse with a hidden menace, like the lidded eyes of some slumbering beast. As he watched the Eloi go about their carefree lives, another unsettling realization dawned on him. Where were the old, the sick, the imperfect? Their absence was like a missing tooth, not immediately noticeable, but impossible to ignore once discovered. It raised uncomfortable questions about the true nature of this seemingly utopian society. With each passing hour, the time traveler's initial theory about the Eloi being the sole inhabitants of this world began to crumble like a sandcastle against the tide. The air seemed thick with unspoken truths, and he could almost taste the wrongness of it all. He sensed there might be more to this future society than meets the eye, a hidden aspect that lurked just beyond his perception. This unseen element could be the key to understanding both the disappearance of his machine and the peculiarities of Eloi life. As night fell, casting long shadows across the land, the time traveler stood atop the hill where his adventure had begun. His eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of his lost machine or a clue to unravel this temporal mystery. He sensed that he was on the brink of a revelation, one that would shake the very foundations of his understanding of this brave new world. Suddenly, a sound caught his attention. It was faint at first, barely audible over the gentle evening breeze, but as he strained his ears, it grew louder. A splash, followed by shouts of alarm. His heart racing, the time traveler turned toward the source of the commotion. In the gathering darkness, he could just make out a disturbance near the river that wound its way through the valley below. Without a second thought, he began to run, his feet carrying him towards what he hoped would be the answers he so desperately sought. The time traveler's relentless search for his missing machine continued unabated. His attention was suddenly diverted by a commotion near a nearby river, drawing him towards an unexpected turn of events. The air was thick with humidity, clinging to his skin like a second layer as he approached the water's edge. His heart leapt into his throat at the sight before him, an Eloi woman thrashing desperately in the swirling currents, her slender arms flailing against the river's merciless pull. Without hesitation, he plunged into the icy water, the shock of cold stealing his breath away. The roar of the river filled his ears as he fought against the current, each stroke a battle against nature itself. The woman's terrified eyes locked onto his, wide and pleading, her small hands grasping at him like a lifeline. With muscles burning and lungs screaming for air, he finally reached her, wrapping an arm around her waist and pulling them both to safety. They collapsed on the riverbank, gasping and sputtering, the grit of sand sticking to their wet skin. As their breathing steadied, the time traveler found himself captivated by the woman's gaze. Unlike the vacant stares of her kin, her eyes sparkled with a mixture of awe and gratitude that set her apart. In that moment, he decided to call her Weena. In the days that followed, Weena became his constant companion, her devotion as unwavering as a shadow at noon. Her presence was a balm to his loneliness, her curiosity a stark contrast to the butterfly-like flitting of the other Eloi. Through her, he began to unravel the intricate tapestry of Eloi society, each new discovery both fascinating and unsettling. One night, as the moon hung like a silver coin in the velvet sky, sleep eluded the time traveler. His mind buzzed with thoughts of home and the mysteries of this future world. Restless, he ventured out, the soft grass cool beneath his feet as he walked. The night air carried a hint of something ancient and musty, a scent that didn't belong in this seemingly idyllic world. Following his instincts, he found himself face to face with a shocking discovery: the Morlocks. These subterranean creatures moved with an unsettling grace in the gloom, their ape-like bodies and large pale eyes adapted for darkness. Fascination mingled with revulsion as he observed these beings. Their skin, bleached by generations underground, seemed to glow faintly in the moonlight. When a stray beam caught one of the Morlocks, it recoiled as if struck, hissing in pain and revealing their intense aversion to light. Driven by an insatiable curiosity that overrode his fear, the time traveler made a daring decision. He would explore the wells that led to the Morlocks' underground realm. As he descended into the inky blackness, the air grew thick and heavy, like breathing through a damp cloth. His heart pounded a frantic rhythm, each beat echoing in the oppressive silence. Suddenly a sound, a shuffle, a scrape, sent ice through his veins. He had nearly come face to face with one of the creatures in their own domain. With pulse racing and sweat beading on his brow, he scrambled back to the surface, gulping in the sweet night air, as if he'd never tasted it before. As the adrenaline faded, a chilling realization began to take root in his mind. The relationship between the Elois and the Morlocks was far more complex and sinister than he had imagined. Like farmers tending to their flock, the Morlocks maintained the machinery that supported the Elois' carefree existence. But the price of this care was steep and horrifying. The Morlocks were using the Elois as food. This revelation hit the time traveler like a physical blow, shattering his initial utopian view of the future. He found himself grappling with the long-term consequences of the class divide in his own time, seeing its terrible fruition in this distant era. The weight of this knowledge pressed down on him, making each breath a struggle. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, the time traveler found Weena waiting for him. Her trusting gaze stirred something protective within him. In this world of predators and prey, he had become her guardian, even as he continued to unravel the dark mysteries that lurked beneath the surface of this divided world. The sun climbed higher in the sky, but the warmth did little to chase away the chill that had settled in his bones. As Weena chattered beside him, her melodic voice a stark contrast to the horrors he had witnessed, the time traveler's mind raced with questions. How had humanity come to this? What other secrets did this future world hold? His gaze fell upon a crumbling structure in the distance, its weathered facade hinting at untold stories from ages past. Perhaps there, among the remnants of forgotten civilizations, he would find the answers he sought. With renewed determination, he set off towards the ancient building, Weena's small hand clasped tightly in his own. Little did he know that within those decaying walls lay revelations that would shake the very foundations of his understanding of time itself. The time traveler's insatiable curiosity burned within him, driving him to explore the mysteries of this future world. His quest led him to an ancient museum, a crumbling edifice filled with decaying artifacts from past civilizations. As he approached the weathered structure, a sense of anticipation mingled with dread in his chest. The building loomed before him, its once grand facade now pitted and scarred by the relentless march of time. Vines crept up its walls, nature slowly reclaiming what man had built. He hesitated at the entrance, the weight of countless millennia pressing down upon him. Taking a deep breath, he stepped into the musty halls. The air inside was thick and stale, heavy with the scent of decay. Dust motes danced in shafts of pale light that filtered through cracks in the ceiling, giving the atmosphere a dreamlike quality. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the soft crunch of debris beneath his feet and the pounding of his own heart. Moving cautiously through the dim corridors, his eyes gradually adjusted to the gloom. Shelves lined the walls, sagging under the weight of neglect. Books, once proud repositories of human knowledge, now crumbled at his touch, their pages long since turned to dust. The sight filled him with a profound sadness, a stark reminder of how far humanity had fallen. All this knowledge, he whispered to himself, his voice barely audible in the stillness. Lost to time. In another section, he stumbled upon an array of machines and tools from different eras. Their rusted forms told a story of technological evolution, from simple levers and gears to complex mechanisms beyond his comprehension. He ran his fingers along their surfaces, marveling at the ingenuity of his ancestors and mourning the loss of such knowledge. A chill ran down his spine as he realized the implications. How could we have forgotten so much? He wondered aloud, his voice echoing softly through the empty halls. His attention was drawn to a gallery of statues and paintings, like a window into the past. The evolutionary path that led to the Elois and Morlocks unfolded before him in stone and pigment. He traced the gradual changes in human form, from familiar figures to the divergent shapes of the future races. The realization of humanity's split evolution hit him with the force of a physical blow, leaving him breathless and disoriented. He staggered back, his mind reeling. "No," he gasped, "it can't be." But the evidence was undeniable. The division between the Elois and Morlocks wasn't just physical. It was a chasm of intellect and purpose that seemed insurmountable. As he pieced together the story of this world, a cold dread settled in the pit of his stomach. The evidence before him confirmed his worst fears about the fate of his species. He leaned against a nearby pillar, struggling to process the implications of what he'd discovered. In a moment of clarity, he spotted a showcase containing items from his own era. Among the relics, he found a box of matches. His heart raced as he pocketed them, recognizing their potential value against the light-sensitive Morlocks. The small wooden sticks felt like a lifeline to his own time, a reminder of the world he'd left behind. Nearby, a machine caught his eye. With effort, he pried loose a sturdy metal lever, testing its weight in his hand. It wasn't much, but it could serve as a weapon if needed. The cool metal against his palm brought a small measure of comfort in this alien world. As he prepared to leave the museum, the time traveler felt a mix of emotions washing over him. The knowledge he'd gained weighed heavily on his mind, but the tools he'd acquired gave him a spark of hope. He was better equipped now, both mentally and physically, to face the challenges that lay ahead. With a deep breath, he stepped back into the sunlight, leaving the musty halls behind. The missing time machine still eluded him, but he felt more prepared for the dangers of this future world. Clutching his newfound weapons, he set off with renewed determination, ready to unravel more mysteries and find his way back home. As he walked away from the museum, a glint of green caught his eye in the distance. A massive structure, shimmering like polished jade, rose above the landscape. His heart quickened at the sight. Could this be the green porcelain palace he'd heard whispers about? A place that might hold more answers, and perhaps even the key to his return? Without hesitation, he set off towards the enigmatic building. But as he approached, a small figure emerged from the undergrowth. It was Weena, the Eloi who had become his unexpected companion in this strange world. Her eyes were wide with fear as she tugged at his sleeve, urgently pointing back the way they had come. The time traveler turned, and his blood ran cold. A group of shadowy figures was emerging from the forest, their pale, inhuman faces fixed upon him with predatory intent. The Morlocks had found him, and they were closing in fast. The time traveler embarked on a journey to the green porcelain palace, an ancient structure that once housed a museum of science and technology. Accompanying him was Weena, the Eloi who had become his constant companion in this strange future world. As they set forth, the world around them seemed to shift and change. The familiar landscape of rolling hills and gentle meadows gave way to a dense, primordial forest. Massive trees, their trunks wider than a man could embrace, stretched skyward, their gnarled branches intertwining to form a living canopy overhead. Dappled sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting ever-shifting patterns on the forest floor. The air grew thick and heavy, laden with the rich scent of damp earth and decaying vegetation. Each breath felt like inhaling the very essence of time itself, a reminder of the countless years that had passed in this alien future. The time traveler's senses were on high alert, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow, ears straining for any sound that might signal danger. Their path wound through the wilderness, a barely discernible track that seemed to vanish and reappear at will. Occasionally, they found themselves uncomfortably close to the ominous wells of the Morlocks. These dark, yawning holes in the earth loomed before them, exhaling a cold, musty breath that sent shivers down their spines. Each time they passed one, Weena's grip on the time traveler's hand tightened, her delicate features contorting into a mask of primal fear. "It's all right," he murmured, trying to soothe her. But the trembling of her small form and the wide-eyed terror in her gaze spoke volumes about the deep-seated dread the Eloi harbored towards the Morlocks and the darkness they represented. As they pressed on, the forest began to thin, the trees becoming less dense, allowing more light to penetrate the gloom. In the distance, a structure unlike anything the time traveler had seen in this era came into view. The green porcelain palace loomed before them, its walls a striking shade of jade that seemed to glow with an inner light. Despite the millennia that had passed, the building stood remarkably intact, a testament to the ingenuity of the civilization that had created it. "Look, Weena," the time traveler breathed, gesturing towards the palace. His voice was filled with awe and excitement. Can you imagine what wonders it might hold? Weena's response was a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Her eyes darted between the palace and the lengthening shadows as the day wore on, her body language a clear indication of her internal struggle between wonder and fear. They approached the entrance, a grand archway that seemed to beckon them into the past. As they crossed the threshold, the time traveler felt a sense of reverence wash over him. Here, preserved like insects in amber, was a snapshot of human achievement at its peak. The vast halls of the palace stretched out before them, filled with an array of machines, scientific instruments, and technological artifacts from various periods of human history. Dust-covered displays housed everything from primitive stone tools to complex mechanisms whose purpose the time traveler could only guess at. Each item told a story of human ingenuity and progress, now silent witnesses to the fall of civilization. As he moved from exhibit to exhibit, the time traveler's mind raced with possibilities. He wasn't just a visitor to this museum, he was a man on a mission. His eyes scanned each display, searching for anything that might aid him in his quest to recover his time machine. In a small, unassuming corner, he made a discovery that sent a thrill of excitement through him. A box of matches, their heads still intact, and beside them, a lump of camphor, its pungent scent barely diminished by time. With careful reverence, he collected these treasures, his mind already formulating plans for their use against the nocturnal Morlocks. Throughout their exploration, Weena's behavior became increasingly agitated. As the light outside began to fade, casting long shadows through the palace windows, she huddled closer to the time traveler, her eyes darting nervously to every dark corner. "What is it, Weena?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Her reaction was like that of a child afraid of the monster under the bed. Except in this world, the monsters were all too real. The time traveler felt a complex mix of emotions as they prepared to leave the palace. Excitement coursed through him at the discoveries he had made, each item a potential key to his survival and escape. Yet a sense of foreboding settled in his stomach like a lead weight as he contemplated the journey back through the darkening forest. As they stood at the entrance, the green porcelain palace looming behind them and the shadowy forest ahead, the time traveler took a deep breath. The expedition had equipped him for the trials to come, but it had also deepened his understanding of the tragic history that had led to this world of Elois and Morlocks. With Weena trembling beside him and the weight of his newfound tools in his pockets, he steeled himself for the perilous journey back. The sun was sinking rapidly now, its dying rays painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The forest, once a place of wonder and discovery, now seemed to loom menacingly before them. Shadows lengthened and deepened, transforming familiar shapes into grotesque, threatening forms. The time traveler felt Weena press closer to him, her small body shaking with fear. As they took their first steps back into the forest, a bone-chilling howl echoed through the trees. The time traveler's heart raced as he realized the true danger they now faced. The Morlocks were awakening, and the night belonged to them. Night fell swiftly, enveloping the time traveler and Weena in darkness. As they journeyed back from the green porcelain palace, the once familiar landscape transformed into a dense, foreboding forest. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. Shadows danced between ancient trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, scraping against the inky sky. The time traveler's grip on Weena's hand tightened, his palms slick with nervous sweat. He could feel her trembling beside him, her small frame pressed close, seeking refuge from the encroaching gloom. Snap! A twig broke in the distance. The sound shattered the eerie silence, sending a jolt of fear through the time traveler's body. His heart raced, pounding against his ribcage. He knew what it meant. The Morlocks were stirring. "Stay close," he whispered to Weena, his voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. Her wide, frightened eyes met his, a silent plea for protection that twisted his gut with a mixture of determination and dread. Without warning, pale forms burst from the undergrowth. The Morlocks, their eyes glowing with an eerie, predatory light, lunged for Weena. Time seemed to slow as the time traveler's mind raced, frantically searching for a means of defense. His fingers closed around the box of matches in his pocket, a relic from the green porcelain palace. With trembling hands, he struck a match. The small flame flickered to life, its warm glow a beacon of hope in the suffocating darkness. The Morlocks recoiled, hissing like scalded cats. Their pale, sightless eyes squinted against the unfamiliar light. Seizing the moment, the time traveler tossed the burning match into a patch of dry underbrush. The flames caught quickly, spreading with a hunger that matched his desperation. What began as a defensive measure soon spiraled out of control. The ancient forest, parched and filled with decades of fallen leaves, became a tinderbox. Fire raced up tree trunks and leapt from branch to branch, painting the night sky with an infernal glow. The heat seared the time traveler's skin, sweat beading on his forehead and running down his back. Chaos erupted around them. Animals fled in panic, their cries mingling with the crackling of flames and the thunderous crash of falling trees. Smoke billowed through the air, stinging eyes and choking lungs. The time traveler fought to keep his bearings, one arm wrapped protectively around Weena, as he fended off the retreating Morlocks with his free hand. "Hold on," he shouted over the roar of the fire. But his words were swallowed by the cacophony of destruction. In a heart-stopping moment, a burning branch crashed down between them. The time traveler stumbled back, losing his grip on Weena. When the smoke cleared, she was gone. His stomach dropped, a cold fear gripping his heart despite the inferno around him. "Weena!" he called, his voice raw with panic. "Weena, where are you?" He plunged deeper into the inferno, heedless of the danger. The heat seared his skin, and embers singed his clothes, but he pressed on. Every shadow, every flicker of movement in the corner of his eye sent a surge of hope through him, only to be crushed when he found nothing. The night became a hellish blur of smoke and flame. The time traveler's lungs burned, his eyes watered, but still he searched. He called Weena's name until his voice was nothing more than a hoarse whisper, barely audible above the roar of the flames. As the first light of dawn broke through the haze, casting an otherworldly glow over the smoldering ruins of the forest, the terrible truth began to sink in. Weena was gone. His only friend in this strange, distant future had vanished in the very fire he had started to protect her. Exhausted, his clothes blackened, and his skin blistered, the time traveler emerged from the smoking remnants of the forest. The weight of loss pressed down on him, heavier than the fatigue in his bones. He had meant to save them, but instead, his actions had led to tragedy. Alone once more, the time traveler faced the desolate landscape. The quest to recover his time machine and return to his own era now seemed a hollow goal. For in this moment, surrounded by the aftermath of destruction, he felt more isolated than ever before in this alien world of the future. As he stood there, amidst the charred remains of the forest, a new emotion began to stir within him. It started as a small spark, much like the match that had started this inferno, but it quickly grew. The time traveler's jaw clenched, his fists balled at his sides. He couldn't let this be the end. He wouldn't let Weena's loss be in vain. With each breath, the spark within him grew stronger, hotter, more insistent. It was more than determination. It was a fierce, all-consuming need to set things right, to find his way back home, and ensure that this future never came to pass. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the devastated landscape, the time traveler took his first step forward. The journey ahead would be perilous, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For now he had a new purpose, a new fire burning within him, one that would not be so easily extinguished. The time traveler's determination burned like a fierce flame within him. It drove him forward relentlessly in his quest to recover his time machine. With Weena's memory etched in his heart, a bittersweet ache that fueled his resolve, he finally located the entrance to the Morlocks' underground lair. The yawning mouth of the tunnel gaped before him, a black maw that seemed to breathe out cold, damp air. It beckoned him into its inky depths with an almost palpable malevolence. The time traveler's heart hammered in his chest, a rapid drumbeat of fear and anticipation. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with the crisp air of the world above. The scent of grass and earth, so different from the musty odor emanating from the tunnel, grounded him in the moment. With one last glance at the sky, a canvas of soft blues and wispy clouds that he might never see again. He steeled himself for the dangers ahead. His fingers tightened around the lever in his hand, its familiar weight a small comfort. Then, with a mixture of dread and determination, he plunged into the darkness. The transition was immediate and disorienting. The air grew thick and heavy, carrying with it the musty, acrid scent of the Morlocks. It clung to his skin and clothes, an invisible film that marked him as an intruder in this subterranean realm. Strange, unfamiliar sounds echoed off the damp walls, scuttling, scratching, and the occasional distant screech that sent shivers racing down his spine. The darkness pressed in on him from all sides, a living entity that threatened to swallow him whole. His breath came in short, sharp gasps, the sound unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The time traveler inched forward, one hand trailing along the slimy wall for guidance, the other clutching his lever like a lifeline. He used his matches sparingly, each brief flare of light a precious resource. The flickering flames cast eerie shadows that danced across the walls, playing tricks on his eyes. In those fleeting moments of illumination, he caught glimpses of the labyrinthine passages that stretched out before him. Twisted corridors branched off in all directions, a maze designed to confuse and trap the unwary. As he rounded a corner, the match in his hand sputtered and died. In that instant of total darkness, he came face to face with his first Morlock. The creature's pale, luminous eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with hunger. The time traveler's heart leaped into his throat, adrenaline surging through his veins. Time seemed to slow as the Morlock lunged forward. The time traveler reacted on pure instinct, swinging his lever with all his might. It connected with a sickening thud, the impact jarring his arm to the shoulder. The Morlock fell back, its high-pitched screech echoing through the tunnels, a sound of pain and rage that made the time traveler's blood run cold. More encounters followed, each one leaving him more shaken but more determined. He fought with a desperate ferocity, using both his makeshift weapon and the Morlock's fear of light to his advantage. Every victory, every narrow escape, fueled his resolve to find his machine and leave this nightmarish future behind. The sound of machinery grew louder as he pushed deeper into Morlock territory. It called to him like a siren song, promising salvation. His heart pounded in his chest, hope and fear warring within him as he followed the mechanical symphony. The noise grew to a crescendo, drowning out even the sound of his own labored breathing. At last, he emerged into a vast chamber that hummed with activity. Whirring contraptions filled the space, their purpose a mystery. Gears ground against each other, pistons pumped rhythmically, and steam hissed from unseen vents. The cacophony was overwhelming, assaulting his senses after the relative quiet of the tunnels. And there, in the center of it all, stood his time machine. Relief washed over him like a tidal wave, only to be quickly replaced by dread as he realized he wasn't alone. Curious Morlocks surrounded his invention, their pale fingers exploring its gleaming surface. As they sensed his presence, their heads snapped up in unison, a sea of glowing eyes fixed upon him. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Then chaos erupted. The Morlocks swarmed towards him, their bodies a writhing mass in the darkness. The time traveler fought with everything he had, his lever a blur of motion as he fended off grasping hands and snapping teeth. But they were too many, and he was tiring quickly. His muscles burned with exertion, and sweat stung his eyes. In a moment of desperation, an idea struck him. With trembling fingers, he fumbled for his last matches. The Morlocks pressed closer, their hot breath on his skin, the stench of their bodies overwhelming. Time seemed to slow as he struck the match, the small flame springing to life with a hiss. With a silent prayer, he tossed the burning match high into the air. The flame arced gracefully, then burst into a blinding flash as it ignited something in the air. Perhaps a pocket of flammable gas. The chamber was suddenly bathed in searing light. The Morlocks recoiled, screeching in pain as the light seared their sensitive eyes. Seizing his chance, the time traveler lunged for his machine. His legs burned with exertion as he dodged and weaved through the disoriented crowd. Hands clawed at him, tearing his clothes and scratching his skin, but he pushed on, driven by sheer desperation. With a final burst of speed, he reached the time machine. His fingers flew over the controls, muscle memory taking over. The familiar hum of the machine coming to life was the sweetest sound he'd ever heard. It vibrated through his body, a promise of escape. Just as the Morlocks began to recover, closing in once more with renewed fury, the time traveler felt the familiar sensation of time travel envelop him. Relief flooded his body as he watched the underground lair and its nightmarish inhabitants fade away, replaced by the rapid flux of time passing. He was free, hurtling once more through the corridors of time, leaving the horrors of that dark future behind. But as the adrenaline began to fade, exhaustion taking its place, the time traveler's hand slipped on the lever. In his desperate bid to escape, he had gripped it too tightly, his palms slick with sweat and blood. Now, as his fingers lost their purchase, the lever jerked violently. The machine's steady hum became a shriek, the familiar sensations of time travel, twisting into something new and terrifying. The time traveler's stomach lurched as he felt himself being catapulted forward at an impossible speed, far beyond the era of the Elois and Morlocks he had just left behind. With growing horror, he realized he was plunging into an unknown future, millions of years distant from everything he had ever known. The time traveler's hand slipped on the lever of his machine in his desperate bid to escape the Morlocks. This accidental movement catapulted him millions of years into the future, far beyond the era of the Elois and Morlocks he had just left behind. Panic gripped his chest as the familiar world outside his machine dissolved into a kaleidoscope of change. Landscapes he once knew melted away like ice cream on a hot summer's day, replaced by alien vistas that defied his imagination. Mountains crumbled like sandcastles, their majestic peaks reduced to dust in the blink of an eye. Oceans surged forward, swallowing continents whole, reshaping the Earth's face with terrifying speed. His heart hammered against his ribs, sweat beading on his brow as he white-knuckled the controls. The lush forests he had known twisted and warped, evolving into bizarre jungles of otherworldly plants. Tentacle-like vines writhed and pulsed, their forms shifting before his very eyes. But even these strange flora couldn't withstand time's relentless march. Gradually, all signs of vegetation vanished, leaving behind a barren, alien world. In the sky, the sun swelled like a balloon, its once cheerful yellow deepening to an angry, pulsing crimson. Its familiar arc across the heavens slowed to a crawl, then stopped altogether. With a jolt of horror, the time traveler realized the Earth's rotation had ceased, leaving one hemisphere bathed in eternal, hellish day, while the other languished in perpetual, frozen night. Curiosity wrestled with fear in his gut as he brought the machine to a halt. The whirring of gears faded, replaced by an eerie silence that pressed against his eardrums. He stepped out onto what appeared to be a beach, though it bore little resemblance to the sunny shores of his memories. The air bit at his skin, thin and frigid, carrying the metallic tang of long-dead oceans. He shivered violently, drawing his coat tighter around himself. The enormous red sun hung low on the horizon, a bloated sentinel casting its baleful gaze over the desolate landscape. Its proximity filled him with a sense of impending doom, as if at any moment it might crash down upon the earth, snuffing out what little remained of life. Movement caught his eye, and he crouched to examine the ground. Strange, crab-like creatures scuttled across the sand, their chitinous bodies gleaming dully in the red light. These pitiful beings, he realized with a pang of sadness, were likely among the last vestiges of life on the planet. Their alien forms were a far cry from the diverse ecosystem Earth once boasted, a grim reminder of how far the world had fallen. A flicker of motion in the distance drew his attention. Squinting against the harsh red glare, he made out a large dark shape moving with ponderous grace. Its tentative movements suggested a complex organism, perhaps one of the final forms of advanced life eking out an existence in this harsh future. The time traveler's heart raced with a mixture of fear and fascination as he watched the creature lumber across the barren landscape. As he stood there, witness to Earth's twilight hours, a profound sense of dread washed over him. The weight of eons pressed down upon his shoulders, making him feel small and insignificant in the face of cosmic timescales. All of humanity's greatest achievements, its proudest moments, its deepest loves, all would be erased, leaving not even a memory behind. The futility of it all threatened to overwhelm him. What purpose did their struggles serve, their hopes and dreams, in the grand scheme of things? The time traveler's mind reeled, grappling with the enormity of what he was seeing. His legs trembled, threatening to give way beneath him as the full impact of this grim future hit home. With shaking hands, he climbed back into his machine. The finality of this future, the inescapable fate of all he held dear, sat like a stone in his chest. He set the controls to return to his own time, each movement heavy with the burden of knowledge he now carried. As the machine whirred to life, whisking him back through the eons, the time traveler's heart ached. He had sought adventure and discovery, but instead found an existential truth he wasn't sure he was ready to face. The image of that dying world, that bloated red sun, would haunt him for the rest of his days, a grim reminder of humanity's ultimate destiny. The familiar whirl of the time machine surrounded him, but something felt off. The controls weren't responding as they should. Panic rose in his throat as he realized he might be trapped, hurtling through time with no way to stop. Just as the fear threatened to overwhelm him, the machine gave a violent lurch, and everything went black. The time traveler materialized in his laboratory, his form shimmering into existence mere hours after his initial departure. Disheveled and exhausted, he stumbled out of the time machine, his mind still reeling from the incredible journey he had just experienced. The familiar surroundings of his home felt surreal, a stark contrast to the fantastical world he had left behind. His legs trembled with each step, muscles aching from exertions in a time not his own. The soft carpet beneath his feet seemed alien after the rough terrain he had traversed. As he approached the dining room, the gentle murmur of conversation and the warm glow of lamplight spilled from beneath the door. His hand hesitated on the doorknob, a moment of trepidation washing over him. How could he explain what he had seen? Would they even believe him? Taking a deep breath, he pushed the door open. The scene before him was like a painting frozen in time. His dinner guests gathered around the table, engaged in animated discussion, oblivious to the extraordinary adventure their host had undergone. The narrator, mid-sentence in some scholarly debate, was the first to notice the time traveler's sudden appearance. A hush fell over the room, the abrupt silence as jarring as a thunderclap. All eyes turned to the bedraggled figure in the doorway, a stark contrast to the well-dressed gentleman at the table. The time traveler stood there, his clothes torn and stained with blood, hanging off his frame like tattered flags. His face, once clean-shaven and composed, now bore the marks of his ordeal. A week's growth of beard, smudges of dirt, and a wild, haunted look in his eyes. The air in the room seemed to thicken, charged with a mixture of shock and curiosity. The gentle clink of a fork against china broke the spell as one of the guests dropped his utensil in surprise. "Good heavens!" exclaimed another, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "What on earth has happened to you?" The time traveler's lips curved into a weary smile, the simple act seeming to require immense effort. "My friends," he said, his voice hoarse and barely above a whisper, "you wouldn't believe me if I told you, but tell them he did." As he sank into a chair, gratefully accepting a glass of water, the time traveler began to recount his fantastic tale. His words painted vivid pictures of a world both beautiful and terrifying. The sun-dappled meadows of the Elois, their childlike faces turned up to the sky in innocent wonder, contrasted sharply with the dark, oppressive tunnels of the Morlocks, where the air hung heavy with the stench of decay and the chittering of unseen creatures echoed off damp stone walls. He spoke of Weena, his voice softening with affection as he described the childlike creature who had become his companion. The guests leaned in, captivated as he recounted their tender moments by the fire, the warmth of her small hand in his, and the heart-wrenching terror of their separation in the forest, where shadows seemed to come alive with malevolent intent. When he described the Morlocks, a collective shudder ran through the room. The time traveler's voice grew tense, his hands clenching and unclenching as he relived the horror of those underground encounters. The guests could almost smell the dank, musty air of the tunnels and hear the eerie chittering of the pale, ape-like creatures. In their mind's eye, they saw the glint of inhuman eyes in the darkness, felt the cold touch of clammy hands reaching out from the shadows. As he spoke of his journey to Earth's final days, the room grew still, the weight of eons pressing down on the listeners. The time traveler's words conjured images of a dying sun, its bloated red form hanging low in a sky the color of old blood. He described a desolate beach where strange, crab-like creatures scuttled across the sand, the last vestiges of life on a planet long abandoned by humanity. The guests felt a chill run down their spines, suddenly aware of their own mortality and the vast, incomprehensible span of time that stretched out before and behind them. Throughout his tale, the time traveler's audience listened with a mixture of fascination and disbelief. Their expressions ranged from wide-eyed wonder to furrowed brows of skepticism. The narrator found himself particularly drawn in, his mind racing with the implications of such a journey. The very fabric of reality seemed to shift and warp around him as he contemplated the possibilities. "But surely," interrupted one of the more skeptical guests, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife, "you can't expect us to believe all this without proof?" The time traveler nodded, as if he had been expecting this challenge. With trembling hands, he reached into his pocket and produced 2 withered flowers. They were unlike anything the guests had ever seen. Delicate, otherworldly blooms that seemed to shimmer faintly in the lamplight, their petals iridescent and impossibly thin. "These," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "were given to me by Weena, a small token of a world 800,000 years in the future." He then gestured to his torn and bloodied clothes, his fingers tracing the ragged edges of a particularly vicious tear. "And these," he added, his voice growing hard, "are the result of my encounters with the Morlocks. I assure you, gentlemen, no contemporary tailor could replicate such damage." Despite this evidence, most of the guests remained skeptical. They exchanged glances, their minds struggling to reconcile the fantastic tale with their understanding of reality. Time travel, Elois and Morlocks. It all seemed too incredible, too far-fetched to be true. The narrator, however, found himself more open to the possibility. There was something in the time traveler's eyes, a depth of experience and emotion that couldn't be faked. As the night wore on and the discussion continued, he found himself hanging on every word, his imagination fired by the possibilities of what he had heard. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, painting the room in soft hues of pink and gold, the time traveler's tale came to an end. The room fell into a contemplative silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. They had been given a glimpse into a possible future, a warning of what humanity might become. The implications were staggering, the questions endless. The guests began to stir, preparing to leave, their minds still grappling with the story they had heard. As they filed out, casting curious glances back at the time traveler, they knew that this night would stay with them forever. Whether they believed his tale or not, it had changed them, opening their minds to new possibilities and forcing them to confront the vast, mysterious nature of time itself. As the last guest departed, the time traveler remained seated, his gaze distant and unfocused. The narrator lingered, watching his friend with growing concern. Suddenly, the time traveler's eyes snapped into focus, a fierce determination burning in their depths. "I must go back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There's so much more to learn, to see. The future, the past. It's all out there, waiting to be explored." The narrator opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, the time traveler was on his feet, striding towards his laboratory with renewed energy. As the door closed behind him, the narrator couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of an even greater adventure, one that might change the course of history itself. The time traveler's extraordinary tale had captivated his audience for days. Now, as the dust of disbelief settled, he was preparing for another journey through the fourth dimension. The air hummed with anticipation as the narrator, the time traveler's trusted confidant, made his way to the familiar Victorian house. The setting sun cast long shadows across the cobblestone street, mirroring the mixture of excitement and trepidation that churned in his stomach. Stepping into the workshop was like entering another world. The scent of oil and metal hung thick in the air, mingling with the warm glow of gas lamps. Tools lay scattered about, a chaotic testament to the feverish preparations. In the center of it all stood the time machine, its brass and ivory gleaming like a beacon of possibility. "Ah, you're here!" The time traveler's voice cut through the ambient hum of machinery. His eyes sparkled with an almost manic enthusiasm, his hair disheveled from running his hands through it countless times. "I'm just making the final adjustments. This time, I'm going prepared." He gestured to a small leather case nearby, his movements quick and jerky with excitement. "I've packed a camera. Imagine photographs from the future. That should silence even the most stubborn skeptics." The narrator nodded, remembering the wall of disbelief that had met the time traveler's first account. A pang of worry shot through him. "And what of specimens?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. A mischievous grin spread across the time traveler's face, transforming him from a serious scientist to an adventurous schoolboy in an instant. "If the opportunity presents itself, why not? A flower that hasn't evolved yet, perhaps, or a curious little creature. The possibilities are endless." As he worked, the time traveler shared his theories about time and space. His words painted vivid pictures of cosmic highways and temporal eddies, making the incomprehensible almost tangible. The narrator listened, spellbound, feeling as though he stood on the precipice of a new era of scientific understanding. Finally, the moment arrived. The workshop fell silent, save for the soft ticking of a nearby clock. The time traveler took a deep breath, his excitement now tinged with a hint of apprehension. He turned to the narrator, his voice suddenly solemn. "If I don't return, well, you know my story. Keep it safe." With that, he settled into the machine saddle. His hand hovered over the lever, trembling slightly like a leaf in a gentle breeze. Then, with a determined set of his jaw, he grasped it firmly. The air in the room seemed to thicken, pressing against the narrator's skin. The time machine began to pulse, its crystalline structure shimmering like heat waves on a summer road. The narrator's eyes widened as the machine's outline blurred, becoming translucent, then transparent. In the blink of an eye, both the time traveler and his marvelous invention vanished, leaving behind only a swirling eddy of dust motes in the suddenly empty space. The silence that followed was deafening. The narrator stood rooted to the spot, his mind reeling. Minutes ticked by, then hours. He waited, hoping for the familiar shimmer to reappear, bringing his friend back from whatever temporal shore he had landed upon. The workshop, once alive with possibility, now felt hollow and abandoned. Days passed, stretching into weeks. The time traveler did not return. The narrator found himself returning to the workshop, drawn by an inexplicable hope. Each time he was met with the same emptiness, the same silence. Left alone with the incredible secret, the narrator found himself lost in speculation. Had his friend ventured even further into the future, beyond the twilight of humanity he had previously witnessed? Or had he turned his sights to the past, to the great civilizations of antiquity? A more troubling thought nagged at him, growing louder with each passing day. Had the time traveler met some unforeseen danger in the depths of time? The possibilities were as endless as they were unknowable, each more terrifying than the last. As the sole keeper of the time traveler's astounding story, the narrator was left to ponder the nature of time itself, the fate of humanity, and the untold adventures that awaited in the vast, uncharted expanses of the fourth dimension. The time traveler's absence left behind a legacy of questions, each more profound and perplexing than the last. In the quiet moments of the night, when the boundaries between reality and imagination blurred, the narrator found himself listening for the faint hum of the time machine, for the triumphant return of his friend. But the silence remained unbroken, a constant reminder of the mysteries that lay beyond the veil of time. And so the narrator was left to carry the weight of this incredible knowledge. The story of the time traveler became both a burden and a gift, a tale that would forever change how he viewed the world and humanity's place within it. As he looked to the future, he couldn't help but wonder, would the time traveler's journey inspire others to follow in his footsteps? Or would the secrets of time travel remain locked away, waiting for another visionary to unlock them? The story of the time traveler may have ended, but its impact would ripple through time, challenging our understanding of reality and inspiring generations to come. And somewhere, somewhen, perhaps the time traveler still journeyed, exploring the vast tapestry of time, forever seeking the answers to the universe's greatest mysteries.
This book was generated using Speakter's AI voices. You can create human-like voiceovers in over 50 languages.